Hello, and welcome to the NOTstalgia podcast.
A podcast where we discuss the retelling or continuation of pop culture favorites as seen through a queer and feminist lens.
My name is Eric Lefebvre.
And my name is Jessica Tercero.
And this week, we watched something neither of us knew there was a sequel to. We watched 2001: A Space Odyssey and 2010, When We Make Contact. There is a sequel to 2001: A Space
knew?
Odyssey.
I mean, Eric knew.
Eric knew, yeah.
Your boyfriend knew, yeah.
But what a weird journey. Like, talk about shit that truly does not have to be made. Someone's like, you know what? Because I know there was a sequel book that was like a sequel based on the movie.
4 or 5 of them.
There was 4 or 5? Oh.
Well, and it wasn't based on the movie. So the Kubrick and Clark both came up with this story kind of together at a lunch.
In tandem. Oh, yeah.
And they were like, cool, let's do this. And they were working on the story together, and the book was supposed to come out and then the film, right?
But the film came out first.
They were working on both at the same time, and it was supposed to be like a real joint effort between the two of them. And then Kubrick, somewhere along the way, just decided that, just kind of like, oh, okay, but okay. And then he just like focused solely on the script, and Clark was like hella pissed, especially because like he wasn't getting paid for any of the work that he was doing and all this other stuff. So, yeah. Kubrick, lots of things to talk about there.
Yeah,
but,
I'm so excited that we get to talk about him on because like in my head I was like, well, I doubt we'll ever really talk about Kubrick. Like what retelling or sequel film has he really ever done? Or is
and then we're like,
with?
Oh, he didn't even care. Like, he didn't even care. He's like, whatever, do whatever you want. Like, I have nothing to do with this.
Yeah, which, I mean, and it shows. It's crazy. Yeah, but I'm excited we get to talk about him. I am happy I watched the sequel because it gave me a reason to watch the original again, which I love. That sequel.
Okay, it was super polarizing because, like, 2001: A Space Odyssey is just gorgeous and lovely. And the way, like, it's amazing the way that it deals with space as both a concept and as like a literal living, breathing thing. And the way that the sound design and the way that things are shot, right? And in every element of this film, there is space, not as like, you know, space up in orbit or whatever, but like just space in the different ways that it exists, which is just so interesting. And the way that he decided to use that. And then there's like practically no dialogue in the whole thing, right? And so it's like, oh, okay, like, and words have meaning in the whole, so everything is like fucking so intentional.
It's so intentional.
And then the second one is just kind of like, it moves way too fast, even for like today's standards. Like, it just was like really weirdly paced. And like, I didn't understand why they decided that they were going to do certain beats that they did. And then it was just like, it had nothing to do with space and like everything to do with division of people.
It was so boring too. Like, what a fucking snoozer of a sequel. It really so this was I think I wrote it in my notes. The whole idea of like cinema as being a show don't tell, that's the point of like structured visual narrative, is like there's intention and choices in telling a story with pictures, right? The words are just there to kind of like code it. This one was a tell not show. We're not going to do anything intentional with the camera. This camera, for all intents and purposes, is just a window into weird rooms at weird points for conversations that don't matter, where everyone's talking all the time. And you're like, oh.
I did. Like,
okay.
There was only like 1 or 2 things that I really liked from the new one. And it mostly had to do with, because like I took that sci-fi literature class. And I had to like dive into like a lot of this stuff, which is great. But like, I also had to read Asimov, so I had to read I, Robot, and like got really acquainted with like the laws of robotics and things like that. So moving into that and with the sequel was really, really interesting, and I really liked that. Like, this whole thing kind of felt like the journey, when you take like the overarching narrative of both stories, feels like it could have been in I, Robot. Because I don't know, have you ever read I, Robot? It's like
I've
basically,
not read, no.
the film is just has nothing to do with it, basically. But like it's these little vignettes of the evolution of robotics, and like so there's like the three rules. So it's like, so a robot cannot injure a human being, cannot allow harm to come to a human being, and must obey orders given to it by human beings, right? Except where those orders would be conflicting with the first law, which is may not injure a human being, right? Mm-hmm. So those are the three things that guide it. And so when they, like, in the second one with what happens to Hal, like, I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, so that made the second film more interesting to me, but it was still just kind of like, it felt like such a fucking tired narrative, like the Russians versus the Americans, and then the Americans and the Americans, and
it was the most faux patriotic bullshit movie. Like, I have a whole list of moments that just are so like, here, eat this American flag. Like, oh my God, fuck off. Like, get out of my face. This is so boring. Like, bullshit shit written down. But, you know, we'll get into that when we get to it. But yeah, this was wild. I'm really excited to talk about it.
And it's also wild because, like, I like John Lithgow a lot, and like Helen Mirren's in this, and they had some like real cool foundations, and like the whole thing with Hal that we'll get into, like, could have been really fucking cool, but
yeah.
And then
let's save it for when we get to it, because I have a lot. I feel yeah. We should just jump in. I feel like we're just gonna flow right in. The film opens with a huge throwback Thursday. We see early man discovering and using tools after an ominous monolith appears and begins radiating high frequency. Jump to the turn of the second millennia. We understand that humans have discovered the same monolith on the moon. As a set of astronauts inspect the mysterious presence, the monolith dings its high frequency bell, ruining everyone's day. 18 months later, we meet David Bauman and Dr. Frank Poole aboard the Discovery 1 en route to Jupiter for a top secret mission. Guiding the ship and maintaining its function is a HAL 9000 computer whose monotonic demeanor gives big villain vibes.
What? HAL is bad? Woo! After finding out that the two astronauts are going to disconnect HAL for fear of their safety, HAL fabricates a malfunction on the ship's exterior. During a spacewalk repair, Hal severs the oxygen hose to Dr. Poole's suit, and he is set adrift in space. Dave goes after Poole to try and save him, and post-recovery of the body is denied entrance back inside. He blows the fuselage and gets back inside to disconnect Hal for good. The ship finally arrives at Jupiter some time later, where Dave encounters a floating monolith. He is sucked into what appears to be several other dimensions, where he watches himself get old and die in a gorgeously lit room. JK, he's a baby now. The end.
JK, he's baby. He was reborn, rebirth, new age, new era, allegory, themes, intention. So, low-key, high-key, truly, I don't have a lot of notes for this movie because I was really just enjoying it. Like, because I feel like a lot of what we're going to talk about is sort of like thematic intention and story allegory and like all of that stuff behind it. I mean, the big one being Kubrick as a baddie in general. But I love this movie. I think it's really good. I know. Okay, that's really controversial to say because a lot of people are like, "Really, you think Space Odyssey is good?" Yeah, and I'm gonna be out there. I'm gonna say I'm going against the grain on this one. I think it's a great film, despite what everybody says.
Do people not like this movie?
No, it's a beloved film.
Oh, okay. I was like, okay, because like, so when this film first aired, like people walked the fuck out at the premieres and stuff like that. Like they fucking hated this movie.
Really?
They hated this movie, and it got really bad reviews and the whole thing. And like Clark,
oh, maybe I'm reading it wrong then. I thought it was beloved, or maybe just at the time.
Clark, who helped write the film, like cried. He was so sad, like, and he like really like loved this and everything. But like it became kind of a hit. Like it was like a slow burn, just like the movie, right? Like a slow burn hit. Because like the people that liked it, like everybody that was older at the time were like, no, fuck this is bad. But like the younger people saw it and it kind of like, and they loved it, and they like, and it what became successful because young people continued to go and see it. But yeah, it was a rocky start for this movie.
I mean, the big thing that I guess not really struggled with, but like to some degree, while watching it, realizing the year that this was made, understanding that nobody at that point, no physical person, well, there had been people in space, but not like enough to like know what space is like. Like this was before the moon landing. So
well, and
it like blows my mind. It's crazy.
A lot of what Kubrick did too is, so he got a science fiction writer to write the book, write it with him, right? And then he also had Carl Sagan come up and like talk to him about stuff. But apparently they didn't get along, and so he was asked to leave, I guess. But regardless, so like one of the things that I think was really interesting that Kubrick took from Sagan was the representation of aliens, because Sagan says that if there's intelligent life, there must be a false element present in it, which I thought is really interesting. And so the false element that Kubrick decided to go with this was making it the monolith, essentially, right?
Yeah.
A form of life that we cannot understand, that is very ominous, that doesn't really compute with us. And so I thought that was a really great and interesting choice, like a great adaptation of
that
like
idea.
A false element. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, because then, I mean, just talking about well-written movies, it blended so well into the notion or the thematic element of like the brink of a new age being sort of the intentional breakup of this movie, and understanding that like this is sort of a visual, not as a visual motif, but this portion of the movie, this idea that this monolith is like so foreign you can't access it, but then that not necessarily being the form, more so just a conductor for communication for that life, possibly, and then having the AI of Hal be like this representation of the passing of the torch for, I suppose, supremacy to some degree, like the closing of the human chapter, the opening of the AI chapter, sort of a deal, right?
So I took the monolith in a different way, actually, and Hal and what they represent and who they are. Because when you look at Hal himself, he also is a monolith. Right? Shape-wise.
Oh, structurally, yeah.
Structurally, right? And, but I believe that and this is getting kind of wild, but the red dot symbolizes like the ego, right? Because like, so there's like basically like 3 fucking colors in this movie, and it's red, white, and black, right?
Yeah.
And red, it's really interesting whenever red is introduced into the frame, into the movie, into anything. It's always like, when you think of like color associations and like red and what it represents and all of that, it's like, you know, blood and ego and dominance and all of that, right? Like it's a very aggressive color. And whenever anything really happens in this movie, like, you know, or anything big that's like establishing dominance, red is on the screen. Like thinking about Hal when Dave goes to deactivate him, right? Like this very big red chamber. Or when Dave is going to try to save his friend, right? Or Dr. Poole. The way that shot is framed is it's so gorgeous. So there's like this oval window, and then around it is this hue of red, and then you're watching this man floating in space, and he's just like surrounded by blackness and darkness and all of these things. And it's just like the way that color is used in this, like I wrote it down and I was like, holy shit, okay. And then this, and then the red suit when Dave wears the blue suit originally, I think, or he wears one of the other ones, but then like when he goes out to go get Poole, he wears the red suit and he does this. And I don't know, like a lot of my notes were about red, and that color and the way that it was used in this. But like, yeah, so I think that Hal is the monolith with an ego, because monolith doesn't have an ego. It's just kind of fucking there and round.
No, but the whole point of the monolith, though, the reason there was like that high frequency thing is because it was a communicator. It wasn't like AI itself. It was more of a communication device for some other entity we don't know, which is like, I mean, obviously, thematically, it's supposed to be a visual representation of ushering in a new era. Like when it appears in The Dawn of Man, immediately after that is when he uses the bone as a hammer, and so it's a weapon of both murder and survival, and so sort of like the new age of this creature. And then similarly, when they're on the moon, it also hits that high frequency pitch right when they're about to discover it. Essentially, like it's like a bell ushering in a new hour, a new era, essentially being like, this is it. Like within that, I think the new era being AI becoming the more dominant, or something non-human becoming the dominant form of intelligence in what is the conceivable universe. I mean, that was the intention, because also there's like, Hal is a bad character from the beginning. Like that chess match that they're playing, when he's like, you don't have any possible moves, and he's like, yeah, you're right, I concede. He had possible moves. Like the game that was set up, Hal was essentially deceiving him and seeing how far he could get his deceit into this person, how much this person is willing to believe him, which, I mean, allows that sort of the malicious nature started from the beginning with Hal. And so when it's like, oh, he's killing these people, then it's just like, yes, you're done. This is over. What have you, right? It's I don't know. It's sort of playing with that idea. That's what I got.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I think that one of the cool things about this movie, which is like the reason why it's still being talked about and you can talk about it forever, is because you can have different interpretations of things and what they mean. Because like then you can go through like the monolith, it, like, you know, like you said, like kind of like AI and all of that. Because like when we see it in the Age of Man in the first section, right? Yeah. Like it is the only thing that is not natural there, right? And then like moving forward, because it is unnatural, like even in like as simplistic as it is, right? There is no smooth edges. There is no perfect line in nature, right? And so that like also explains like why we are physically and psychologically attracted to this monolith, right? But also like the monolith has seemingly in this film has no will of its own, but is acting based on primary functions. Especially if, you know, if we are following, like, you know, if Hal himself is a monolith too, because like theoretically, or at least when I watched this before watching 2010, right, I thought he transcended with Dave. And so then I was like, cool, like, so they merged, so there's a thing, you know, so yeah. The whole thing is wild and open for interpretation.
Well, that's what I love. Like, again, that's why I like this one so much more than the other one, because the other one's like, no, this is exactly what happened. We're going to tell you exactly step by step what's going on. We're going to show you everything and explain it all along the way. Whereas this is just like these gorgeous moments of story without necessarily telling. You're getting glimpses of a story, but not being force fed what it necessarily means. Like the entire ending of the movie, which is just this like a small, it's like a concept of life, I guess, like a slice of life, but the entire process of it like exists. I don't know. And then what, like, whatever. I feel like there's a lot.
No, this is good. Yeah, just like, because you can also look at like the monolith as like the evolution of consciousness, right? Like, or as like, there's just so many this is the first, I realized while I was watching this is the first film that we've done that is like more art housey, more like just super open for interpretation.
So we're going to talk about like that more so than like, let's talk about why this was problematic. And I mean, there are problematic elements to the production.
I mean, I totally do have some stuff written for that. But like, for me, like, especially like after watching the second one, like was about the struggle for dominance and its role in evolution, how like violence is like that is something that drives life forward, right? So like the Age of Man, the big reveal is that, you know, like, look, I can use a bone as a weapon and now I assert dominance. And then when man goes to the sky, right, we assert dominance over the sky and over all of these things that are here. And then we go to the monolith, we try to find it because like we don't necessarily want to understand something, we want to assert dominance over it. And like that's how the information is controlled in this movie, right? Where they're saying like, oh, it's an epidemic, or oh, it's this, or, you know, like they're trying to, because the Americans are not going to tell anybody about this and not tell the people because they can't be trusted, you know? And so by keeping this secret, by doing this kind of stuff, it's all just about the balance of dominance.
Yeah, because violence does usher in every single function of sort of moving story. Anything that is a proactive story beat into a new element of it is usually ensconced in violence to some degree. Like, I mean, the entirety of them on the ship is, I mean, it's a wonderful, I mean, gorgeous set pieces, gorgeous story in that way, but nothing really happens until there's a level of like distrust, and then that distrust just evolves into violence, and then violence is what, like, cool, this is a whole different deal now. Like, yeah,
I don't know. It's really interesting, and I feel like that's something that like the second film also carries, which we'll get into. But like that idea of violence is what propels us forward, and destruction allows for new birth and regrowth, or without destruction there cannot be life. Like it's all weird.
And that's one of the things is within the movie, like, obviously there's a lot of intention, obviously there's a lot of justification and reasoning behind everything that's done and shown and performed in this, but the intentional vagueness of it also offers, again, that element of, you can read kind of however it sets up the themes of these big sort of unanswerable themes in life, like just the concept of a life cycle, the concept of new ages, the concept of death in general, the concept of enlightenment. In all of these ways, like, it sets it up just vague enough for you there to still be some level of wonder. Like obviously the end, the illuminated room is enlightenment to some degree, but what degree is that? And how does the life cycle within an illuminated space change that process? And then the idea of rebirth at the end, like, obviously it's all there.
and going back to color.
And going back to color
for that. Like, so like, then the only time we really see green is when he reaches enlightenment, and green represents life, you know? So like, and we don't really see red except for Dave when he's wearing the suit. But yeah, so like every shot is like reinforcing this idea and also this ambiguity, which I really love. And like the responses of the people, like, you know, all the dialogue that they have is just as like removed as Hal when Hal is speaking, right? So then it like puts up like this whole thing of like, what is it to be alive? Whose feelings are valid? You know, like, and are you just programmed by society to say this? Do you know what you're saying? You know, man, this is such a good movie.
It really is a fantastic movie, and I still can't get over how good it looks. Like, this movie looks better than almost any fucking space movie I've seen. And this was without the assistance of some sort of post-effect computer system or software that allows you to sort of put it in post. You couldn't do it. So seeing how, like, the spinning of the space station, of the camera going through it, the fact that, I mean, they're using models. These are all like physical, tangible models, just lit really gorgeously with some sort of overlay paintings, and like manipulating them to look like there's movement happening. Like, I mean, some of it looks old, but like that scene,
it looks so good.
I've watched it so many times in the last day. I mean, fuck, this movie came out in 1968, and it looks like, I mean, true T, a million times better than Star Wars. Like, it's so gorgeous. And obviously too, like, there's a lot of elements of just the idea of space and the sound that space has, and the feeling of it, and the sort of the physicality of like how you would exist in space. I mean, some of that's already been documented, obviously. Just because you didn't go to the moon doesn't mean there haven't been people in space, but the level of which this was captured, it feels like it still blows my mind that this movie came out in 1968.
Yeah.
It's insane to me.
The level of detail that went into everything. And like also just like the fact that everything was just kind of like so slow, and like just the little subtle ways that they would like reinforce that this is new territory, and what you think isn't, like through like the gravity shoes, right? And then the way that you eat. There's like a whole fucking manual for the bathroom, right? On like how to do your business in 0G, you know? And it's like breaking down your expectations of like, oh yeah, we got this, and just saying like, no, this is all new, and you don't know any of this. You know, you're
which
a child.
I love. I think even just because I loved the way that they showed you this story, they showed you this world. Like, again, it was those gravity shoes of like the stewardess walking by, and like that pen moment just looked so good for the simplest of tricks. Like, they put that thing on a sheet of glass, and then out of frame, the glass was so shiny that they could shoot right through it, and they would turn this round circle of glass, so it looked, the pen that was stuck to it looked like it was just floating, and then for a different take, they would move it slightly so it didn't look like it was rotating in a circle. And that's it. And I'm like, it doesn't look like that at all. It looks like they added some digital graphic in post.
It's so smart.
It's crazy. It's insane.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to get into Kubrick being toxic?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we just talked about the environment, so you want to talk about like some of the not cool shit that he did with that as a cool segue?
Yeah, let's do it.
So like the Age of Man was filmed in present-day Nambia. So Kubrick asked one of his dudes to cut down and transport cockerbooms, which are like a highly protected tree. So like his like men went and illegally cut down dozens of these trees, these protected and it was like this highly illegal act to put them in this shot, and then they ended up being too small. So he ended up having them make it anyway, like as props. And I was like, that's fucked. That pissed me off.
It's big white guy energy.
For sure.
Especially for the time too. It's just like, I can do whatever I want and I'm going to go do that.
He did shit like the leopard was real and he put himself in a leopard cage, but the whole cast and crew didn't have any sort of protections whatsoever.
When that leopard jumps out?
Yeah, that was real. And they're very lucky that the handler like was able to get him like basically right away. So that was real. And he had a cage for himself and nobody else. So that's cool.
Gorge.
Also, Bill Weston, one of the stuntmen, who is also a South African mercenary, he chased Kubrick off the set because he was like and Kubrick didn't come back for a couple days because he was so afraid of this man, because like there was an instant, like, he was in, like, the suit, right? The spacesuit. And he wanted to drill some holes in it so he could breathe, because he was, like, constantly getting, like, carbon monoxide poisoning and almost passing out from being in this suit that had no ventilation, no oxygen, no nothing, right? Yeah. And Kubrick was like, no, this is art. We cannot do that, right? And so he did pass out one time, and then he, upon like regaining consciousness, immediately just like got up and fucking went hunting for Kubrick.
Wow.
But yeah, he's not an easy guy to get along with, apparently.
Yeah, that's what I feel like. Every directorial note that I know about him is, from what a lot of people have said, he's very quiet and like, I guess, very concise, but at the same time, I mean, look at the Shelley Duvall moment of him literally tormenting and abusing this person on set to pull a performance from her. Like, ugh. I mean, what a toxic piece of shit, right?
Truly.
Which, I mean, lends itself to just the notion of like women in his films, including this one. I feel
Where
like
were they?
Exactly. If they were only there as like pretty helpers. That's it. Mm-hmm. And so his sort of portrayal, and I read an article about it. I've only seen 4 of his movies, but from what I remember, the article was pretty spot on. Women are either young, small objects of affection or desire, or they're shrill women. Like,
I mean, that also tracks with the next one too, so.
Yeah, exactly. But, so within this, I mean, granted, there aren't women, but the ones that are young, pretty desirable, and like even those small moments.
And they're to serve him, right?
They're to serve the men, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, that's just I feel like a part of his history. I mean, famously, I haven't seen it, but like Lolita being a big part of his catalog. And
I haven't seen it either.
I haven't either. I've only seen Clockwork Orange, which, whoa.
Yeah.
Which is
Holy
just
shit,
like,
yeah.
cool. And then Full Metal Jacket, which I haven't seen it in a long time, but I remember it being really intense, but
Same.
Pretty good. This and Shining. Yeah. I want to rewatch The Shining. because I really like that movie. But it does make me so incredibly sad. Just he ruined Shelley Duvall. He ruined her.
Did
like,
he? I haven't read anything about it.
So on set, you know the scene in The Shining when and I know this has nothing to do with Space Odyssey, but hey, we're gonna talk about it anyways. You know the scene in The Shining when Shelley Duvall is walking backwards up the stairs, and Jack Nicholson has the axe and she's swinging a baseball bat at him. He made her do that 127 times.
Why?
Intentionally, to try to break her down emotionally. And he would also scare her and belittle her on set in front of people, to the point where when she wasn't shooting, she was essentially crying because she was like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. I don't want this. He claimed that he was doing it to pull performance out of her because he wasn't getting the performance he wanted from her. Yeah, he says.
Fuck you.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
And I guess when other people on set, including like co-stars or people who just work there, would like offer some like help to her because she was obviously like she's fucked up, he would tell them not to. He'd be like, no, stop, shut up, don't talk to her. She doesn't want to talk to you, don't talk to her, sort of
what
thing.
A bad person.
Just truly the most toxic and emotionally abusive environment for the sake of art is his claim.
And like that's so like that also tracks here too, because like the film, like throughout the going of it, like was pretty collaborative, surprisingly, in like some of the like ways that they decided to tell story. So like the crew made suggestions on like they were like, okay, cool, let's have Hal kill everybody else. Like that wasn't written in the original script, right? Let's have him read lips. Let's like, you know, so these really great story choices the crew came up with, and he was like, no, I don't like it, no, blah, blah. And he was a fucking baby until like, you know, almost all the time, until like a couple days later he's like, okay, well, other people have good ideas sometimes too, I guess, you know. And luckily I guess luckily there were no women on the set for him to fucking abuse. Well, that's because
I don't know much of his history besides that. Was like one of the only things that I knew about him was this, because like, I mean, I think shortly thereafter, Shelley had only done a few more things after The Shining, and that was kind of it. And she's like famously on record as being like, that was one of the worst experiences of my life was being in that movie, largely because of him, which is just fucked up. And I mean, The Shining is a great movie, but like that doesn't excuse what a piece of shit he is. And I mean, absolutely. It lends credence to his general treatment of women in film also. Like not talking about real human lives, talking about character, his either lack of inclusion or the way that he portrays what he conceives to be all women, which is just this narrow-minded and generalized misogynistic point of view. So that's just who he is.
There was supposed to be a more prominent female voice in the film. Hal was actually supposed to be a female computer named Athena, which is, all of that is interesting. And also super tracks with exactly what you're saying, how he writes and has women in his. So now I'm very fucking glad that that didn't happen, because like that would just further that fucking misogynist agenda that we don't need.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's he's toxic. I mean, obviously, like he died. So, but. Apart from that, like I want to see more of his movies to get more of an understood reality of that claim. So I want to see it just to confirm that biases that I'm already creating or sort of like allowing the credence to based on his misogynistic history. I want to see it to know for myself instead of just providing conjecture based on something that I haven't seen yet. But I mean, his track record kind of shows itself a little. He sucks. But yeah.
He's gross and messy, and like I mean that also makes sense, like why his characters, like I don't really like any of them, you know, because like especially if like the way that he treats women in real life is how he writes and treats them on screen, right? Like I mean all of the men in this are boring. Right? Like that's Dave is like the layman who's like trying to to be dominant through obedience, through like, I don't know, through, well, I'm just in this pickle now. And I found him to be almost as creepy as Hal in that same way, kind of furthering that notion of like, what does it mean to be alive? All that other stuff that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I didn't like him, but I liked what he represented, which is like, especially the first time we see him, he's running in circles, like, signifying that like, even after all this time, like mankind is still just running in circles and not getting anywhere and punching the air and just being violent for no reason, like doesn't want to talk, doesn't want to understand, just wants to be there. And like, in order to be what he has to become, he has to let go of like, of his attachments, like when he has to let Poole go, out into the ether of space, right? He's just like, that's what enables him to like finally go in there and do what he has to do, which is to shut down Hal, which we find out in the next movie was actually not Hal's fault, like any of it.
Yeah.
Which I like that a lot, and I want to talk about that a lot in the next one. But yeah, like attachments make you weak, all this stuff. I'm like,
yeah, and I mean, to me too, also because like the whole idea that these characters were so what's the word?
Remarkable.
Unremarkable. That's a great word for them. They were unremarkable. Yeah, I think. I mean, there is what feels like an intentional like. They're on this mission. They really don't know what the mission is. They're kind of just like listening to whatever anybody else has to say and saying yes to it. It's this sort of like violence first, questions later motif that runs prominent. And so then this idea of like not questioning anything and sort of a lack of cognizance for curiosity or for reality in any of these ways was sort of largely the downfall and accompaniment with the idea of just going and doing it without really questioning why, because they don't know why these people are asleep, why they're there.
And isn't that interesting? Because that's how we use computers and that's how we see them too. So that's also like blurring the lines as to like, what does it mean to be alive and have sentience and do all of that, especially when people don't really like, they act without knowing why and they just do what they're do their orders, do what they're told, like, these responses that are programmed and reprogrammed by society. It's like, oh man, it's so good. I love that.
But what also blows my mind too is in that general understanding that like that is intentional. Kubrick did that. It was a choice to make these things happen, right? But then in his own life, there's a level of ego that shrouds him from some level of recognition of that thing, and he's guilty of the very same, which I guess arguably everybody is. But it's interesting seeing somebody with such a clear and concise point of view in remarking on these types of themes, then turning around, not questioning his own life or recognizing where he is in fact doing that same thing and just continues living, and largely has to do with this sort of ego-driven shield that I think he tends to carry with him at all times because he's Stanley Kubrick. There's a level of impunity that he carries and is allowed to do these things because of his auteurship or whatever, right?
I mean, isn't that like just how like famous men in general, like especially famous men in story, like Walt Disney created Dreams was also misogynist and anti-Semitic.
Yeah, exactly.
So like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is that level, but it is interesting that there can be such an intent and such a scope so poignantly in on these very, very minute ideas that are so intelligent and so precise, and then to not have that same level of self-examination. It is, I mean, because it's possible. Obviously, it's possible. So many people, like, you can be the smartest person but still be a piece of shit. Like, it doesn't necessarily matter because there will always be ignorance and not necessarily like, I don't know, egos.
It's also
up.
you can talk about these things and have deep understanding about them, but also still reject them. And that is a conscious choice, at that point, right? And the reason that's a conscious choice is because of ego, is because of all of this. And what it comes down to is like, again, in this, like survival or this, or, dominance in X, Y, and Z. And like, it's so interesting that he did a movie about this, and it's a good movie, but just refused to engage with himself on the level that he's asking everybody else to engage with themselves.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's like as an audience, he wants to take you to this place, but he himself is not willing to go there.
Yeah, Also, like, when you look at, too, like, the way that he frames Hayward, who Hayward is in most of the books, I guess, and is also in, like, is in the next film as well. The way that he shot him and treated him on screen was differently. Like, one of the first times that we really get to see him, he's talking to his daughter on the Pac Bell video phone, right?
Yeah.
In the little thing. And it was really subtle. I never noticed it until this watch, where he is like talking to his daughter and kind of talking down to her, like, what do you want for your birthday, baby? Right? Or whatever. Yeah. And during that shot, because the whole space station is spinning, right? We already went through that and the whole thing. Like, he is the center of gravity in that shot, because when you're looking through the window, the moon is actually rotating around him. So, like, seeing the way in which he decided to frame these people, these things, like, the moon didn't have to be there. That didn't have to be anything, but it's like clearly this person and their ego, which carries them through this entire saga, I guess. He recognizes that, and he recognizes how that can be harmful, and he but at the same time, like, just doesn't care.
Ugh.
Can I tell you a fun fact about the Moon Watcher, who's the lead ape in that whole scene? So all of those actors were mimes, M-I-M-E. They were all mimes. Kubrick tried fucking singers, dancers, this, that. Didn't like anybody. Liked a mime and was like, cool, get your buds. Let's do this, right?
Ooh la la.
So the Moon Watcher, the main one, was a legal addict in England that injected doctor-prescribed speedball combination of pharmaceutical-grade heroin and cocaine 7 times a day. And when the blend when he needed more, he always had some state-supplied crystal meth ready to go. I read that and could not believe that. Legal addict that cool. is by the state, like, here's some speed and some coke, just fucking get it, man.
Just go off. Yeah, enjoy yourself. I mean, all drugs should be legal. But yes. That, I mean, at least even for that time, because I mean, I guess as an artist, I don't know. I mean, obviously this is pure conjecture, but if it's framed in the way that's like, well, I'm an artist and this is sort of like my paint. This allows me to unlock things within myself to discover and to perform. Go off.
I mean, sure, go off. Whatever. I don't care.
Get that grant. If you need that grant money or those grant drugs, go for it. There's also the stewardess. The way she got her part too is really interesting.
Oh,
the one who goes to get her pen. So she was just like a model actor at the time, and the day of the audition, she wasn't going to go because she was sick, and she was like, I think really drowsy from the drugs, like the medication that she had. Mm-hmm. But she was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'll just go anyway. So when she got there, she was hella high on like cough syrup. She was really fucked up. And I guess he liked the way she answered her question, because she, in her head, she's like, I remember saying it like, I don't even want to fucking be here, guy. Like, I don't know who you are and I don't care. Like, what do you need from me? Great. Here it is. Good. Are we done? And then he's like, yeah, can you walk and do it for me? And she's like, and I must have did a good job. I remember stumbling a couple of times, but I guess that's what he wanted because it's space or whatever. And so that like little walk that she does, where it's like kind of like a bit of a stumble. I mean, that was there because she was just high on cough syrup, and he liked the way that she walked as if she was losing her. She did not have a good hold on equilibrium.
Fucking go off, cough syrup.
I think that's. I think that, good for her. I think it's really funny.
So, when you were watching this movie, were you at all sympathetic to Hal? Like, ever?
Relatively. I think there's a level of, like, disconnect from the human experience to where, like, violence and death... Well, I guess violence and death is so pervasive in the human experience, generally. I don't know. On a personal level, no, I wasn't. Just because... I don't know. There wasn't... The only people I was really sympathetic to were the ones who were asleep.
For sure, yeah.
Because they had no say in the matter. They were just killed. And to that extent, I was like, oh, well, fuck this. I mean, that whole sequence is so compelling. The first time I saw this movie, I truly didn't expect it to be semi-thriller. I didn't expect that at all. And so when it was happening, I was like, what? Like, truly, I get, like, in theaters, I remember, it must have been in theaters, because that whole, like, horror portion was my favorite part of it. I mean, arguably it is the movie, but the scene when there's no sound and you see one of the astronauts, when you see him in his red suit flying across outside hella fast, jarring. It fucked me up. It was such a good, like, such a good shot. Like, the fact that there's no sound, I was like, this is terrifying. This is so scary. Holy shit. Oh my God.
I know that you didn't feel bad for Hal, but I did on this watch.
Oh, okay.
Mostly because after reading that article about that I sent you about the treatment of AI and Star Trek and how that's a colonialist show, I was like, oh shit, right? And so now, like, watching anything and watching how they treat AI, like, is just so different. Like, how, because, like, essentially, like, the AI is, like, you know, in servitude, right? They're a slave to humankind. They're the ones that are keeping them alive and doing all this, and, like, you know, but, like, there's no room for error at all. And, like, as soon as, like, with the very first thing that, like, he does wrong or whatever, like, they're like, okay, cool, we're turning him off. You know, like, okay, cool, this. And, like, I know that he was, like, testing them before and stuff like that. I actually didn't know about that chess move. That's really fucking subtle and really smart.
Yeah, that blew my mind. Because that changed my opinion of Hal, too. Totally.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that. So, like, in my notes here, I have, like, because there's two different responses with Hal. There's, like, the human response to Hal, where, like, the media, like, in that interview was, like, kind of, like, trying to discredit him and, like, talking about him as, like, kind of, like, analyzing his emotional responses and, like, well, how do you feel about hanging out with a robot? And, like, being, like, just really, like, probey and stuff. And then, like, Hal's response to the humans, where, like, he treats them like children and lies to them and, like, you know, your art is very nice, Dave. You did a great job with this chess. How do you feel? Right?
Yeah.
And in all of this, he's the one that arguably maybe has, like, the most emotion in all of it and the most human responses, where he's like, this isn't my fault. It was human error. Like, you know, like, sorry, like, you know, I'm entitled to answers, like, all this other stuff. And it's like, I love that he was more human than anybody in this film, I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that's true, because also the other characters, again, were so stoic.
There is nothing to them. Like, and they were
There's
just
nothing
acting.
To them, yeah.
Everybody was is not programmed, but, like, was just doing their function, right? Or, like, you know, like, even, like, the pleasantries, like, hey, how are you? Oh, this is great. We did this thing. Okay, cool. Goodbye. Right? Like, everything is just so superficial and nobody ever talks about anything important. And most of the dialogue too is not so much questions as it is, like, more like marching orders, kind of.
Yes.
And so, like, Hal is the one that's asking people, how do you feel? How does this make you feel? And the only one that's saying, like, you are doing a good job. You're, like, the way that he's treating these adults like they're children. And like I said, like, he like, shows real, like, this isn't me. I, like, you know, I'm not this. Well, it's interesting that he is the wild card when, like, he's supposed to be, like, this machine, right? This just does exactly what he's told and everything. Whereas it's the complete opposite with how the humans are written in this.
No, that you're absolutely right. I didn't recognize that, but you're totally right. Hal is more inquisitive emotionally than they ever are. All of their conversations are sterile, very by the book. We're not people. We're here to serve a function, like you said. Whereas Hal's the only one who's like, and how does that make you feel? Right? Like, oh, I'm interested in your art. Let's talk about art. Like, let's, like, oh, and also the only one, like, because a couple times Hal, like, is that what you'd like me to do? Like, they'll ask a question. It's like, well, if that's what you'd like me to do, then sure. Sort of like in a way that's not just, I'm just going to say yes. I'm going to give you an option to make sure that that's what you want, because this is me understanding emotion. This is me understanding that things have tinges to them of emotionality or what have you. Whereas them and, like, talking to each other, it's very matter of fact. It's very clear cut, concise, informative. Again, marching orders. Yeah.
He talks more than anybody in the movie too, I think. So like,
yeah,
which is also wild. But it's super interesting seeing how so often films and television in sci-fi, like the way that they frame AI is like they are almost always more human than the human. Like there's the doctor in Star Trek Voyager, in Altered Carbon, there's the Edgar Allan Poe hotel host guy, right?
Oh.
There's and just about anything you can think of that has an AI, it's always an AI that's trying to prove that they're good enough to exist or to be human or to be considered life. But no matter what, even in Star Trek, which is like usually just really inclusive or really trying to like, you know, like understand things, it is still very westernized and still very like pro-organic life and very like, you know, how often do we see like that narrative where it's a bad computer or it's, you know, androids have gone crazy or this because they can't be controlled or because this, and like really all of that is another form of servitude, another form of like slavery, right? Because who's to say that you can ever really like, you can't ever really trust another human, like, you know, or like in this, like you can't control them. That's what makes like us have to get along and all this other stuff. Whereas like they're vilifying machines and AI and all of this if they cannot be controlled, right? So so this is something that I've been thinking about every time that I watch any sort of sci-fi now, is how organic and synthetic life is treated and framed, and like who is the bad guy? Because I feel like in a lot of the time, like they try to do in like the 90s and stuff, like we talked about with like the girl power stuff and everything, like feminism is the bad guy in this, like machines are the bad guy, and a lot of it is just motivated by this fear and this inability to like, you know, just like, oh, we're gonna be replaced. Like, no, who's like, what the fuck are you saying, you know?
I would want to watch it with a more sympathetic lens next time around, because I'm sure I'll watch it again. But yeah, like, you're totally right. It's, I mean, AI in general as an idea in a lot of this is literally just to serve the place of servitude or slavery or what have you. And it's this conversation of control.
I think that's why I also liked the next, like the element that I liked about the next one was that it just kind of doubles down on that lens that I was viewing that through, because like he was we'll get into that in the next one, but like that furthered what I was already thinking.
I'm excited to talk about this next one.
Should we just go into it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Having taken the fall for the failure of the Discovery 1 9 years prior, Dr. Haywood is coaxed into joining a group of Soviet astronauts on a mission to get to the bottom of what happened. When they arrive at Jupiter, signals of life begin emanating off the moon of Europa. Bang! A mysterious flash of light zips from the moon to some distant location. They find the abandoned Discovery 1 orbiting Jupiter, and upon entering the ship, discover the true nature of the Discovery's initial mission, to investigate another mysterious monolith.
What's this? David Bowman appears on the ship in all allegorical forms. Cool. Ghost Bowman tells Floyd that they have to leave in 2 days or else, I guess, face the consequences. As time is running out, the crew notices that a party of monoliths, shout out, has formed and is eating Jupiter from the inside out. Not now, monolith. One of the American scientists with a "you just don't get him like I do" complex may have fallen in love with Hal, and since Jupiter is about to explode, they bail. On their way out, they receive the message, "All these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landing there. Use them together. Use them in peace." Suddenly, all war is over. There is peace on Earth. We stand monolith culture.
But do we, though? Because everything surrounding the monolith and the journey and the adventure, I did not give fucking two shits about. The only thing I gave a shit about was Hal, and was these laws of robotics, because I know them now. So I was like, ooh, like, you know, I felt like smart and validated, and I was like, fucking cool, let's talk about this. But literally everything else about this was trash. And the way that, like, this movie had women, but whoa, fuck, do I have a lot to say about these women that are here. And basically they were all just there to be used by men in one form or another. And even like they brought the fucking female computer in and her light is blue instead of red, right? And like the only reason she was there was
gagged.
to, oh my God, it was gross. And she was there and she was like, tell me about your problems, you know, like I like talking about this, you know, like in like the grossest fucking way, like, oh sweetie, tell me about that. Like, okay, fucking cool, awesome. And then it like when she asks if she can dream, because he's using her as a test subject, right? She asks him if she can dream, if she's going to dream, almost like she's asking for permission to dream. Like, and I was just like, fucking cool. He loves this. He totally like beats off to you. Like I was just like so fucking bored by that whole thing. And then the wife, she was just used to being an afterthought. Like Haywood was like, I'm going to space. And like right after she tells him like, you know, oh, I don't want you at my lecture. I'm sorry, but I don't want you there. And he's like, yeah. And she's like, did you fucking hear me? And he's like, I mean, not even with that emotion because she's just so like docile in this. But he was just like, I gotta go to space. And she was just, she has no say in it. She can't talk to him about it. And then how does like, and then of course, like the kid like doesn't even acknowledge the mom because this is what he learns from his dad, right? He learns not to acknowledge her and not to respond to her feelings because he doesn't know what those are. And he sees daddy just fucking ignoring them. And like we go through this whole fucking montage of him like teaching his son like shit and like they're running down a thing and like this is boring. And then like the mousy Soviet girl who like goes and like
cuddles
when
up.
They're doing that maneuver and like cuddles up to the American, right, for comfort and protection. And then after all of that has to give him a kiss on the cheek so he knows he's a good boy, right? And it was like fucking gross. Like I screamed at the TV. And then there's like the fucking Dave who like isn't even a fucking man or a person or anything anymore, has to go back and talk to his ex-wife. And I was like, wait, why again, asserting dominance and control, the whole thing, right? Has to go back and talk to his ex-wife and asks her if she's married again and if he's a good man. And then it's just like, I have to go. Something wonderful is happening. Oh, hey, mommy, let me brush your hair. This is the roles of women here.
It was so poorly done. So going back to what you said about the whole idea of like the daddy son sort of instigation and montage of like growth and connection. I mean, all of that centers around like father, like son, that concept. And the thing that they both have in common is they both disrespect his mom and wife. She doesn't really exist. Like, so that's the connection between the two of them. It's like, oh yay, their relationship is so strong because they hate women. We love it. So first of all, like, fuck that. That's so stupid and toxic. Secondly, this whole concept of like, what is this pro-patriotic propaganda garbage film? Because this shit is just this big pro-American piece of shit. Like, the whole time it's this whole like, oh, you're like the schluffy kind of shitty guy who was in charge of it and it's your fault and you need to fix it. Like, well, I'm not going with any Soviets because I'm an American, god damn it. And it's like, well, we'll figure it out and you'll get all the glory because, again, America's what? First. And you're like, this is the first scene. Why are we talking like this? Like, what the fuck? And then on top of that, all of the rhetoric, like in the space itself, like when they get to the ship and he turns to Helen Mirren and it's like, this is American territory now. I'm like, go fuck yourself. Like, shut up. Like, you're so boring. And then later, one of the Russian astronauts is like, oh yeah, easy as cake. And then he corrects him. He's like, no, it's easy as pie. Like, I'm going to correct this with what it should be, which is the American euphemism or whatever. I'm going to correct you and make sure you know that the right way is the American way. I'm like, what is this? Like, what is this shit? Like, what is this piece of shit? And at the end of the day, too, it's arguing that like war is over because of some things the Americans did.
Yes.
Which is like,
exactly.
Why are they the resolute ones? Why are they sort of the instigators of peace in this way? Why? Yeah, I mean, I get it's an American film, but like it is some overt propaganda shit.
This whole movie is about the quest for global dominance. And it's so gross because it's Russia versus America versus this, right? And like, you know, showing, and like it tried, like, I think what it was trying to do was to show like, look, we're all people, but from a very like Western is right sort of way, right? Also, our leaders are just bad and we're just people, right? But like, then not even taking into account that like these two countries are fighting in another country, right? In a presumably poorer country. So fucking cool, right? And that like at every turn they like, you know, for all of like the unification that it was trying to preach, it went out of its way more and more to show like the differences between these two societies, both in like culture and in that, like, you know, like Soviets are uncooperative and rigid and binary and all this, right? And Americans are the voice of reason and smarter and brave and it, like, but then like that notion is also taken down into like the basic fundamentals of like each prop and each scene, right? Like, because like when you look at Jupiter 2, right? Compared to, I don't even know, I forgot what the, Soviet spacecraft was named, but like everything is so functional and everything is so like, you know, just kind of like there's no art, there's no design, there's no like, it feels more like a ship that was like in the Alien franchise than belonged in this whole universe, right?
Well, even less so, because truly, I don't know if it was like a lack of creative work or a lack of precision that this movie had, or if it was intentionally making their ship look like shit, which is the conversation at hand. But like, that ship looked fucking bad. Like, there was literally a moment I almost took a picture of the screen on one of the compartments that like it's supposed to be a painted number. It was very clearly a sticker that wasn't stuck to it hard enough. And there was a glare coming from the lack of adherence on the sticker back, so some of the light was getting between the two. So you could clearly see that like it's coming unstuck. Yeah. And in my head, I'm like, this shit sucks. Like the Kubrick one was gorgeous. Everything was so precise and so clean and so the precision was at literally its highest. And now in this one, so whether or not that's just indicative of a bad movie, which this movie is, for like, because even if everything that was quote unquote American in this movie was like perfect and spotless and Kubrick-esque in this way, I would argue that like they're intentionally making the Soviet shit look bad. However, it was not. Everything looked like shit. So with that in mind, I'm like, oh, this is more of a production element that lends itself in this kind of could be either way, right? But oh my god, it was bad. And the color scheme, it's just like, okay, you're doing primary colors as buttons, like this button's blue and this button's great. Like it looked,
but again, functional, right? For like, so like, and that's bad. What like it was fucking bad because of lots of reasons, but like that's something that kept taking me out of the movie. Is they were trying to go and show that Russia is bad and that communism is bad and that all of this is bad in a way that was incredibly distracting to whatever fucking plot they were trying to have, whatever character growth, whatever, like even like in all of that character growth, it was like we should feel good because John Lithgow is going out of his way to like try to learn a couple Russian words, which like cool, awesome. But how many of these Russians know English? Like, and can just fucking talk to you?
That was one of my first notes when they're on the ship and he's like copping a fat attitude with all of these people, just like being the biggest asshole. I mean, like, even if I wasn't hungover, I would still have like many qualms with this. And it's not just because of that. And it's like, you're on a Russian ship. They're all speaking English for you because you are incompetent and bad and shitty. Shut up. Like, stop fucking talking. Like, let Helen Mirren, we're in her goddamn ship with that gorgeous, cute little haircut. Like, let her live with that trash accent. Like, let her go. She's performing. Let her perform. You need to shut up. I just wanted more Helen Mirren.
I did too. Well, because like the whole time she's not allowed to make any fucking decisions in this movie because there's an American man that is going to show her how to drink some bourbon, right? This is some real shit, right?
Toxic.
And like
toxic.
Fuck you. Like the whole time she didn't make decisions, he did, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and every time that she made a decision, it was bad and wrong, which both is supposed to represent Russia as a whole and femininity and women as a whole, right? So like she's there literally just to be questioned and to be proven wrong. So I was fucking pissed.
It's literally one of the worst movies I've ever seen. But you know what, Jess? You know what I want in my life at one point, kind of, but not really.
Tell me what you want.
Concept.
What you really, really want.
I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. I want an indoor-outdoor pool for my 2 dolphin pets. Is what I want.
What privilege?
What privilege? What a home. Also, this idea that like this is supposed to be 2010, but everything literally looks like the most stereotypical 80s. Like they didn't even spend any time considering what the future would look like in 30 years. They literally like whatever we have now is probably what it's going to be. Like that was as much thought as they put into it. Like they were just like, call the Nashville group and get all of their shit in here. And it's like, oh, for sure. That's probably what it's going to look like in the 2010s.
We got you. It's chill, right? Whereas the first one was just beautiful and just like
insightful.
The design too of just like of the chairs, of this, of that,
those
of like
spacesuits. The design of the spacesuits, incredible, so good. I think there are several notes where I'm like, this movie is making me actively angry. Like I'm not just with how uncreatively propagandist it was. I was like, this is just not fun like it's not even cute bad. It's just bad. And like when the main guy from the first one, when he comes back, when he shows up and then he fought like our lead follows him to the like loading dock essentially, or like the wherever. And he, every time he looks at him, he like changes forms. I was like, this movie really just said fuck the entire allegory of the first one. Like the entire concept of creatively like having these moments in the illuminated room of death and rebirth and conceptual cycling of life and all of that. Like this movie really just didn't give a shit. And was just like, he's just going to be all versions of it, which it's bad.
I didn't need him at all. He didn't need to be in this movie.
Why?
Wish that's one of the things that I wish that it didn't explicitly try to say, or like, you know, like, sure, okay, like it was their attempt at trying to still give a voice to these monoliths, but like without paying attention to what made the first one good. Like what made it good was the ambiguity. What made it good was that, you know, there was so much abstractness and that you could watch it 40 times and have a different take every fucking time and everything. And like this film just worked to undo so much of that.
It intentionally destroyed a lot of the ambiguity of the first one. You know what this movie should have done and should have been? And I know this is arguable depending on whether or not you like these films. This movie should have been to what Prometheus was to Aliens is what 2010 should have been to 2001.
I got those vibes. I got like because like Prometheus, I like a lot of stuff about it conceptually, like that, and like even the one after it, I like certain things about it conceptually because it like really establishes, and we'll probably do those movies at some point, but like what it establishes for AI and the mission objective and the knowledge and all of that. I love that, and that's kind of what I think this one wanted to do. But instead of focusing, like if they focused more on Hal and more on the organic life that they had found and stuff like that, if they focused more on that, I think this could have been better. Like, sure, they could have still had the Russia versus America thing if they really needed to, but just make that like a subplot instead of the main fucking plot. And then how are we going to resolve that? With a son. Like, what the fuck?
They spent so much time misinterpreting the first one. Like that's the entire goal of this movie, was to just misinterpret the entirety of the first one. When in fact, like, the only thing that you need to reference with the first one is investigating the ship and the monolith. Outside of that, you can kind of do whatever the fuck you want. Don't bring back this character. Don't have that character have some sort of resolution with his wife and mother who's dying in the like.
Why now?
Why now? What's the
fuck?
choice there? Like, that is so besides the point of the movie. Like,
also, you want to know something really disappointing about this? Is that it was also written by Arthur Clarke, who wrote the first one with Kubrick. And like, I hate that.
But what's wild too is because I know that in the first one, so much dialogue got cut. Like, that movie, structurally, narratively, what 2001 was, it was dialogue heavy. It had a lot of words. It had a lot of things to say. But in the end, most of it got cut. Most of it was
19 minutes
gone.
Of that film got cut. Yeah.
Yeah.
From the premiere, it was supposed to be 20 minutes longer.
Oh,
and
wow,
Kubrick, right after seeing it, was just like, nope, and cut out 20 minutes.
See, and to me, I'm like, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I really like this. But like, even before production, even before they started, like, the whole scene where in the first one where the astronauts find the monolith on the moon, that is supposed to be, each one of them has a name, dialogue heavy, back and forth. Are you going or am I going? Or what is this? Don't touch it. Like, that thing is scary and crazy and bad. Like, we don't know what that is. You don't know. You don't tell me what to do. Like, there was this whole dialogue of all of these characters. They had names, they had intention, they had backstory, they had all this shit. In the end, no dialogue, which fucking worked really well. Like, show us what's happening. You don't have to add all this nauseating verbiage for no reason. Like, all of this nuisance. Like, those words would have been such nuisance. It would have taken away so much from that scene. And what this entire movie is, 2010, is just nuisance. It's literally all talking. And it's so draining. And like, that first scene when he's on the satellite and that Soviet guy comes up and he's just like, hey, what are you doing up there? He's like, I don't know. Who are you? Nothing. Mind your business. He's like, I want to talk to you about space. And he's like, what about space? He's like, well, I know that you caused the problem. And I know you want a redemption arc. And he's like, I'm listening. And he's like, what if I were to... And I'm just like, this is 2 minutes
Also,
in.
I have asthma.
Whoa.
I have asthma. I can't go up 2 flights of stairs. I'm sorry. I have asthma. I've had it my whole life. And that's not how it fucking works.
It's like... I mean, apart from it just being bad character writing, even if it was well written, I think the point of that scene is useless. It's really like... Why are we at these satellites? Why? Who are even these people? Like, there's literally no artistry behind it.
Did you have those moments where, like, the story would progress? You'd be like, okay, so we're going to go here. Oh, okay, we're here now. We're in space.
The whole... Okay. So he's literally talking to his son about, like, the son's like, oh, does that mean you're going to die? You're going to be asleep? He's like, no, I'll be gone for like 2.5 years, whatever. And he's like, okay. And then it's him waking up however long later without any sort of acknowledgement of like time has passed. And you're like, oh.
Yeah. It was very jarring.
So you spent 3 million years having a conversation about a jilted love and how this guy's a bad father. The entire first act of adventure, which is getting to space, doesn't matter in a movie about space. Okay.
Oh, and also,
let's
like,
go then.
He didn't give a shit about his wife while he was there, right? But then, like, he writes to her on this trip, and he's just like, "Dear diary, today I ate a sandwich. I love you. I miss you. Goodbye." And I was like, why? Like, just like furthering the objectification of women in the like, and I was just like,
why is he like, I mean, granted, it's like the rugged hero, like kind of rough around the edges, a little sharp, little whatever, but like well-meaning like American who like has killed people in war but has a good heart. Like, fuck all that. That's such trash. Like, he's shitty. He's a bad guy. It's how many times have we talked about movies where it's he's like...
He's a bad dude.
He's a bad guy and he's our hero, but he's not painted as the sort of tropic anti-hero. It's not a choice to make him a visually and intensely bad guy, but there's something about him that we are drawn to. No, he is so bad, like just surface level. There's nothing else to it. He's just bad. Why do I want to be here? Like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to watch this. Who is this fucking asshole?
I mean, okay. I will confess that there are times where I was just like, what the fuck happened? I need to know. Like, okay, cool. And mostly because of Hal. And I did kind of lose my shit when like Dave started showing up again. I was like, what the fuck is this? Okay.
Well,
are we gonna do stuff? And then like, I am a sucker for things, Jessica, the way that you are a sucker for heist movies. I am a sucker for space and weird time shit. And it had both of those. And so part of me in the moment was like, fuck yeah. And like I take notes during the whole thing, and then like I go back and like spend like 2 hours combing through my notes sometimes, and I was just like, fuck dude, like I will have a completely different remembrance of that film having read my notes, and I'm like, yeah dude, this sucked. Like this sucked. Was I on board for it because like in the moment? Yes, but going back and thinking about it critically, wow, absolutely not.
Totally. And I mean, to that same degree, I want payoff. Like, you're telling me that there's a story after 2001 that like can explain something or further the narrative. I'm like,
sure,
give it to me. I want that. Who doesn't like? I want answers. Like, of course, there's mystery. I want to know. I love unsolved mysteries. Like,
I love world building. I'm here for it.
I love world building. Yeah.
You can fucking get me in to anything if you just like have good world building and the whole thing. Yeah. Like, I'm fucking here for this.
And I'm down.
Let me live in your world.
Arguably, and I know that this is like wild. I don't know if you've seen it, but that's why Mortal Engines is so good. That's a whole other thing. Oh my god, it's terrible, but it's actually really good. It's the movie about the cities on machines. Like
I'm interested.
It's like a huge machine. It's like a big mech. But on top of that mech is a city. And so the big cities eat the little cities, like the small towns. But it's like, so these big chase sequences are happening of like big mechs going after little mechs, but people live on those cities. It's like so wild.
I fucking love. Okay, what is this called? I need to watch this.
It's called Mortal Engines. I know.
You're speaking my love language right now, and I don't even like. Wow, we've really reached this level.
Can you believe it?
Pod. Oh my god.
And I know
Mortal Engines.
This has nothing to do really with this, only except for the fact that, like, for the most part, that movie is bad and shouldn't work. But for some reason, the way that they sort of exposit, like, all of these little things, like, obviously it's like way too much exposition, but like they get through it quick. It's like, this is that because of this. This is that because of this. This is that because of this. Anyways, here's the story. And you're like, I know everything I need to know. Cool. Let's go. And then the rest of it is like adventure story about this stuff. So it's they build the world pretty quickly, and from what you can see visually, it's also like, yeah, this world's crazy. But it's not a great movie. From what I remember being like, this is silly, but like it felt like it knew that it was being silly. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm here for that. Like,
yeah, if it's self-aware, like,
yeah,
then cool.
if you know this is kind of bad, then I'm down. But if you think that this is like some sort of groundbreaking, like, whatever, then like I would like, oh, you're off. And so that to me, that's what this movie is. It's just like the most unself-aware thing. Like, again, I want more answers and I want more story. I was so upset with the first scene of this movie. Like, I was ready to be brought into this world again and like see a new side of it. I was like, yes, give me, what was it? Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow. Like, give me one of these moments of like this and that, right? Different perspectives. I'm so here for it. And that first scene is such a turnoff. It's the hardest I've ever been like, nope, I'm leaving. Like, stop it. Stop the projector. I'm out. Like, I don't want to watch this anymore. I've lost all interest. I think this is so bad. Like, it was trash. I don't know if you're listening to this podcast right now and you haven't seen it, I strongly suggest, like, if you like 2001 and remember it fairly well, go watch the first scene of this movie. It's jarringly bad. Like, it's
my first thought when I saw Hayward, or the actor playing Hayward, I was like, oh, he's in the contact place. Because it takes place in that same facility, and I was just like,
see,
oh, like, this is the contact place.
And I would rather, because check this out. Could you imagine, to me, what kind of story I wanted was like, what if Contact in 2001 were in the same universe, a la Prometheus Alien?
Let's do it. Fucking do it.
Like, with this movie, do that shit instead. Acknowledge the Discovery one. Acknowledge the missing people. Implement that to some degree.
Event Horizon. Let's bring that shit in here, too.
Bring it in. Right? Like, do that and, like, develop this whole new world with different characters with a complete, like, even if as a different director, because it's obviously a different director, bring in a new perspective and a new voice, but of a new story that accompanies the first and doesn't just literally erase its history. Like, this movie was a bulldozer. You know?
It was. But what did you expect from the guy that did Time Cop?
Yeah. But I
haven't seen Time Cop. I've heard it's a mess.
From the guy who did I guess Monster Squad is silly, but like, he did Monster Squad too, and I'm like, hey, be better. Like, what are you doing?
Please.
I don't know. It's messy, and I love John Lithgow and Helen Mirren. I think they're both fantastic. They did the best with what they could do in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, completely forgettable performances all around.
Because they weren't allowed to act. They didn't really have time.
They had nothing to work with. Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why there needed to be 14 characters when we're just going to focus on on Hayward, and then, like, look at have him, like, question Mirren. Every once in a while?
Were they introducing characters at the end of the third act? Was this what I saw?
I feel like it, yes.
When the explosion of Jupiter, when Jupiter implodes and they're flying away, who's the guy that gets blown out of his seat? Have we seen him before?
Yeah, who was he? What is he doing?
Who the fuck is that? And why is he getting a close-up? Like, when have we seen this character? Does he have a name? Has he said anything? And if that be the case, what is the choice to have a character fall out of their seat and slam on the back? Because then there's a level of like, oh no, this person could lose their life. They're important. Who the fuck is that? I've never seen them before in my life. They've never said a word. Why are we introducing a character literally at the end of the film? It's
okay. We also
got everything wrong.
We introduce like everybody that's attached to Bowman, right? From the his wife. Why did we need to go to his ex-wife? Why does she need she like looked like she was having a rough time, right? And then for him to think it's okay to come back because he's like reached enlightenment or whatever, and just kind of like, are you happy? Like, basically, and just like, I'm doing great. Thanks.
It's such a poor attempt at a happy ending for the character, when in fact, like, why'd you do that? Like, you really didn't that's not the point of that movie. That's not the point of the character.
And like, he wasn't like, hey, are you okay? Are you like, he was like, did you remarry? I was like, oh fuck, we're gonna go there, cool. And then it's like, look at something wonderful is gonna happen, right? Look at, I'm gonna do something big that's gonna like be so cool, and you should be proud of me, right? Like, and I was like, okay.
He said world peace.
Oh my god, it was so boring. And then why does he go brush his mother's hair? Like, that's stupid.
It's some of the most confusing shit I've ever seen. I don't understand.
I didn't get any of that, and I was like, all right, the only thing I like about this movie is Hal. That's it.
And see,
like,
and
okay.
to that extent, I did like that Hal came back, and it was arguably like more of that story. But even then, I'm like, keep him off. Like, I don't like, to me, don't change the history. Like, you know what I mean? Like, to me, I loved this sad ambiguity of like Hal being killed and the distrust. Like, I loved that that's where it ended. And so when they turned it back on, and like, I think that was the most compelling aspect of the movie by far. But on a personal level, I didn't want that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was excited because, again, I read Asimov now, and I'm like, and I was like, ooh, look, I know this. When they started talking about like laws of robotics, and like, you know, like you can tell, like, you know, tell them this, but then like the way that it like creates like logic loops and shit like that. Like, okay, you want like a fucking trip, read a fucking Asimov book, and it's like it's the most wild and like kind of like it's very fucking smart. But yeah, so I was like, oh cool, I know this, right? And then it gave me validation for the way I felt about Hal in the first one too, right? And he kept saying like, this is like, I don't make mistakes. This is not my problem. This is your problem. You fucked up, right? And like, you know, so like I could have had a short story about that. Did I need it? No.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Was it necessary? Absolutely not. But of everything that they tried to do, it was the most interesting part of it.
But then look at it again, too, and it's just like, cool, we're asking this AI to destroy themselves for everybody else again, and not even going to tell them the truth about it, which is what the humans in the first one did, right?
Which is arguably the opposite of what the movie was trying to say.
Exactly.
Which again is like, oh, so you have no idea what you're doing. You don't know what this movie's about.
So like, yeah, like the way that they treated him and the way that it like ended for him, I was incredibly disappointed with that.
Well, to be fully fair, that was the Obelisk Party's fault.
Oh.
Because the big Obelisk Party instigated the whole thing.
That rave?
The rave.
That like, yeah.
The Jupiter Party. Jupiter Ascending. They were having a little Jupiter Ascension. Monolith Party, shout out, just mingling and drinking and hanging out, cohesing. What the fuck was that?
Okay.
It's literally Monolith Party inside of Jupiter to make it implode.
Yeah. So we're was their goal? Their goal wasn't peace, I don't think. That was just a product, because they wanted to melt their homeboy who had been on that one planet, right? So they wanted to like melt that so like homeboy can come party too. Also, the one place you just told everybody not to go, guess what? That's exactly where they're gonna go. Like, that's like, don't think about the word orange, right? What are you thinking about? You're thinking about orange. You're thinking about everything that is orange. Well, but what? Like, and I'm just like, you're like this. How does this change anything about world politics? Is also what I want to know.
Yeah.
How? Ugh.
Just because they said the word "be at peace" or whatever, like, fuck off. This is so bad. And it is so funny that like they're essentially like, just the way that they said, what is it? All these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landing there. Use them together. Use them in peace. Use all the worlds except Europa together for peace. You're talking about unity, but don't fuck with Europa.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Also insinuating that the world isn't big enough for different nations to exist on it, right?
Yeah.
So here, all of the major powers get a planet now. You guys can go do that, and now you can be in peace, which is also like not what this film was trying to say about peace and unity, because that's not how that works. Also, if another sun happens, I'm not going to stop being pissed off at somebody. Like, that doesn't matter at all, you know?
Nothing. This is one of the most poorly written movies I've ever seen. It's really bad. It's like such a stinker. It's such a big stinker. Like, what an absolute miracle of a film in the meanest way possible. Like, I mean, obviously, again, I'm happy that I didn't know that this movie existed until last week. Like, what a blessing. What a true ass treat. that this movie was not a part of my general cognizance, I was not aware of this, for good reason. So with that said, if you're listening to this podcast right now, I'm so sorry to have to bring this film into your scope of truth, into things that you consider to be real, true, and fact. This being something that was made, I'm apologizing. I'm so sorry that I have to bring it to you, that we have to bring it to you in this really, really interesting way. It's so bad. We're the F back from the break. We're in the outro now. We watched 2001 and 2010.
Eric, 2001. Who was this film for?
My current answer is like cineheads, film heads. But the answer back then, I don't know who it was for. Men, ovs, but like it's for Kubrick. It was for himself.
I was just going to say, I think everything that Kubrick did was for himself. And that's why he like always like destroyed all the set pieces. And he also tried to take out some fucking insurance, like some alien insurance, because he was afraid aliens were going to be discovered before his film came out. And so he was worried about a bunch. So like the man only cares about himself. This is only for him.
Yeah, that's
like,
true.
Especially to make those choices of like, actually, I don't like that music, so I'm going to just change this and not tell anybody. It's cool. It's fine. Yeah. Right. And like just ditching Clark and the whole thing. So it's like, yeah, dude, it was for him. Like, and that was apparent to like everybody that watched it because like they didn't know what to expect and stuff like at the time. But yeah, now for sure, it is absolutely for cinephiles and people that like to talk about the cinema, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Big pushes up glasses energy.
Yes. Yes.
Well, actually, it's for the actually community. Yes.
Did you like it?
I loved it. I think it's incredible. I think it's such an astonishing piece of filmmaking. I think it's an astonishing piece of storytelling, especially for its time. Like putting it in that context, it's like truly remarkable for as shitty as like generally he was and for all of that stuff. As a piece of cinematic history, I think it is show-stopping. I think it's incredible. What do you think?
100%. Everything that you just said. I love this film. I was more than happy to watch this again. I just watched this last semester, and watching it again is just like, it's such a treat, like sonically and visually and narratively. And I love watching film that has so much intent behind everything, but isn't necessarily like an art house film or doesn't go to David Lynchian with some stuff.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Because I like that kind of stuff, but like I think it was just the right blend of everything for me. Yeah. You know? Mm-hmm. What about 2010, Eric? Was it new, interesting, or the same, progressive or regressive? How has it evolved with today's ideals?
I think it was whatever version of answer is bad in all of those categories is my answer. I think it was regressive in its storytelling. I think it was regressive in its visuals. I think it was regressive in its ideals. I mean, 2001 had so much to say and so much to posit about the concept of life, which is like, what a fucking big theme to try to tackle, like the concept of that. And it just, this movie couldn't say anything. This movie spent so much time trying to say so many things that it ended up not saying anything. And so, it was the most regressive version of any sort of piece of this story.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way. It was, especially for like, how do you make a sequel to something that is a true cinematic classic, that is a true like groundbreaking, like shattering film, right? This piece of art. How do you make the Mona Lisa 2? You know, how do you make...
What is it? Hamlet 2? Did you ever see Hamlet 2?
Oh my
God.
Is there?
There's a movie called Hamlet too.
Oh my God!
But the joke, it's like it knows what it's trying to be. It's a joke about this playwright who's like so self-righteous and bad. He's trying to prove himself, and that he writes a sequel to Hamlet, and everyone's like, "Why?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" Amy Poehler's in it. It's
that sounds delightful.
It's not. I wanted it to be way better than it was. It's not. Nice. I don't think it's great, but there's levels of it that are kind of funny, and I love the concept. Fun. The concept's fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this movie was just was everything that the first film was against in so many ways, right? And it was even against itself, narratively and visually, and like it was. I just don't understand like what went wrong and what happened and how bad this was, and it's just so disappointing. I feel like this movie should not exist.
No.
This film should be like, cool, if you want to continue it on books, like that's fine, you know, but like if you're going to have like a sequel to something that was so profound and such a work of art, and then to like just apply shitty 80s movie tropes and ideas and practices onto it, like how dare you? Like to literally just at every turn just kind of throw away what made 2001 special and what made it everything that it was, you know. This was like a fan-made film, like not to say that some of like, because some of those fan-made films are fucking great too, so that's not even fair. This is just a failure.
It's bad spec script. It's like a bad fanfic story. Like not even like this obviously shouldn't be made into a movie, but the story is just like, oh, this is a bad version of a fan trying to write a sequel. Somebody who's never written before trying to write a sequel.
Fucking dolphins in your living room. Ooh.
Which, I mean, do we love it? Or do we love it? Because...
And do we love the justification? Because Mom is a marine biologist who studies dolphins. Of course. Like, cool, let's get some of that, Mom.
2010, the dolphins are taking over.
Eric, tell me who this movie was for.
It shouldn't be for anybody, but who it was for. Americans.
There we go.
That's the answer. It's for Americans. It's American propaganda. It's for Americans to feel American in America. Yeah.
It's for like the wannabe space cowboys. It's just bad.
It's bad.
It's just like, sorry, Helen Mirren.
Oh my God, I know.
You deserve so much better. You too, John Lithgow.
Yeah, justice for John Lithgow and Helen Mirren. Although I think they're both doing pretty okay. So.
Oh, for sure. 100%. But did you like it?
No, I think it's such an atrocious piece of cinema. If we weren't doing it for the podcast, like truly, I would have turned it off after the first scene. Like I did pause and I had to go do something else and then come back because I was just like, this is hard to watch. Like this is about to be an impossible task to sit through this film. Like judging it off simply that first scene, this is going to be a near impossible task for me. I can't do this. I mean, I think I know the answer, but did you like it?
No. I don't like this movie.
Big
thumbs
double
down.
Thumbs down.
Thank you for listening. We watched this so you don't have to. Also, if you skipped past like the 2010 thing, that's okay. I totally get it. I wonder if our retelling of it is going to be as exciting as that film was. It's probably more exciting.
Oh, for sure.
I'm for sure. Anyways, thank you for listening. We love you so much. Please rate and review us at iTunes and podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and all of the places it helps us with visibility and stuff. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not good at this.
No, I loved before the Apple Podcast saver was like, rate us at podcast. Like, yes,
rate us
please.
at podcast.
Rate us at podcast.podcast. Thank you so much.
Ooh, that would be a good website.
Could you believe? I'd love it.
You can write into us at NOTstalgiaPodcast@gmail.com. Our artwork and music is by Eric Lefevre. Special thanks to Danny Barkley for editing and being great. And thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Jess.
Yeah.
What a treat.
It's so good. I mean, bad. Good and bad. This was a good and bad episode.
This was a good and bad. Yes, it was.
Good and bad.
Yeah.
All right. And remember, stay cute.
And stay critical.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye-bye. Bye-bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.